I never thought a plastic ice scraper would land someone in court, but here we are in suburban Minneapolis, where the Willow Creek Homeowners Association has turned my Tuesday morning into a legal nightmare. My name is Ethan Yamley, and I have lived in this cookie-cutter subdivision for 3 years. I work as a software developer from home, which means I witness more HOA drama than any sane person should. The association president, a woman named Brenda Hutchins, runs this place like her own personal fiefdom. She has written me up twice for leaving my trash cans out 4 hours past collection time, and once for having a lawn that was allegedly 1 inch too tall according to the covenant rules. Living here feels like being back in middle school with a hall monitor who never grew up. January in Minnesota is brutal. The temperature hovers around 15 degrees most mornings, and my car accumulates frost every single night despite parking in the driveway. That ice scraper I kept in my Honda Civic was nothing fancy, just a blue plastic one with a brush on one end that I bought from Target for $7. But it was mine, and I needed it every morning to clear my windshield before heading to the occasional in-person meeting. The morning everything went sideways started like any other. I grabbed my coffee, threw on my winter coat, and headed outside at 7:30. The sun was barely up, casting that weak gray light that makes everything look depressing. My breath formed clouds in the frigid air as I approached my car. I reached for the door handle, planning to grab my scraper from the passenger seat where I always kept it. Gone. I checked the floor. Nothing. I checked the back seat, thinking maybe it had fallen. Still nothing. Then I noticed something odd. My car door was unlocked. I always lock my car. Always. Years of living in Chicago before moving here had made it second nature. I felt that familiar twist in my stomach that comes when you realize someone has been in your space. I walked back inside, confused and irritated. My wife Tessa had already left for her nursing shift at Abbott Northwestern Hospital, so I could not ask her if she had borrowed it. I sent her a quick text anyway, then grabbed an old credit card to scrape my windshield like some kind of caveman. It took 15 minutes and left my fingers numb. That evening, I was taking out the recycling when I saw something that made my blood boil. Brenda Hutchins was getting out of her silver Lexus SUV 3 houses down, and sitting right there on her dashboard was a blue ice scraper with a brush attachment. My ice scraper. I recognized the small crack near the handle where I had accidentally shut it in the car door last month. I walked straight over before I could talk myself out of it. Brenda saw me coming, and that fake smile plastered itself across her face, the one that never reaches her eyes. "Ethan, good evening," she said in that syrupy voice she uses when other neighbors might be watching. "Brenda, is that my ice scraper in your car?" I asked, pointing at her dashboard. Her smile did not falter. "I have no idea what you mean. This is my ice scraper. I have had it for months." "It has a crack near the handle. That is definitely mine. Did you take it from my car?" Now the smile disappeared, replaced by that pinched expression she gets when someone dares to question her. "Are you accusing me of theft? That is a serious allegation, Ethan. I suggest you watch what you are saying. My car was unlocked this morning and my scraper was gone. Now you have one that looks exactly like mine, crack and all. What am I supposed to think?" Brenda stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You left your car unlocked. That is a violation of Section 12.4 of the HOA Covenant. Unlocked vehicles are considered a security risk to the neighborhood. I will need to write you up for that." I stared at her in disbelief. "You are going to fine me. You just admitted you knew my car was unlocked." "How would you know that unless you tried to open it?" "I do my rounds every morning," she said, lifting her chin. "I check for covenant violations. Your car door was visibly ajar. That is how I knew. My door was not ajar, it was closed. Unlocked but closed. Well, either way, that is a violation. You will receive a notice in the mail. Now, if you will excuse me, I have dinner to prepare. She turned and walked toward her front door, effectively dismissing me. I stood there in her driveway, my hands shaking from cold and anger. She had actually done it. She had stolen from my car and then threatened to fine me for it. The audacity was breathtaking. When I got back home, I called Tessa and told her what had happened. She was furious but also worried. Ethan, she is vindictive. Remember when the Johnsons tried to fight that fine for their fence color? She made their lives miserable for months. I do not care, I said, pacing around our kitchen. She cannot just steal from people. That is actual theft. That is a crime. What are you going to do? I am calling the police. Tessa was quiet for a moment. Over a $7 ice scraper. It is not about the money, it is about principle. She thinks she is above the law because she is HOA president. Someone needs to show her that she is not. I could hear Tessa sigh on the other end. Okay. I support you, but be prepared for her to make things difficult. After we hung up, I dialed the non-emergency police line for Bloomington, the city where our subdivision is located. A dispatcher answered, and I explained the situation as calmly as I could. It felt ridiculous saying the words out loud. Yes, someone stole my ice scraper. Yes, I know it only cost $7. Yes, I am serious about filing a report. The dispatcher said an officer would come by within the next few hours to take a statement. I spent that time looking through my Ring doorbell footage. My camera faces the street and catches part of my driveway, but the angle is not great for seeing the passenger side of my car where someone would have reached in to take the scraper. I scrolled through the morning footage anyway, and at 6:45 I spotted something interesting. Brenda Hutchins, wearing her distinctive purple puffer coat, walking down the sidewalk. She paused when she reached my driveway, looked around, then walked up toward my car. The angle cut off, but I could see her standing there for about 30 seconds before walking away. When she came back into frame, she was holding something blue. The footage was grainy in the early morning light, but it was enough. Officer Martinez arrived at 8:30. He was a younger guy, probably early 30s, with a patient demeanor that suggested he had dealt with plenty of neighbor disputes. I invited him in and showed him the Ring footage on my laptop. So let me make sure I understand, Officer Martinez said, taking notes. You believe the HOA president took your ice scraper from your unlocked vehicle this morning, and you saw that same scraper in her car this evening. I know she did. Look at the footage. That is her walking up my driveway at 6:45 this morning. She is holding something blue when she leaves. My scraper was blue. And you can identify the scraper as yours. It has a specific crack near the handle. I saw it clearly on her dashboard. Officer Martinez nodded. Okay. This would be petty theft, which in Minnesota is defined as theft of property valued under $500. It is a misdemeanor. Given that you have video evidence of her approaching your vehicle and the fact that you can specifically identify the item, we can proceed with charges if that is what you want to do. That is exactly what I want to do. He looked at me seriously. I have to ask. Are you sure you want to pursue this? Petty theft charges over a low-value item can sometimes create more problems than they solve, especially in situations involving neighbors. Officer, this woman has been harassing me and everyone else in this neighborhood for years. She abuses her power as HOA president. Maybe if she faces actual consequences for breaking the law, she will think twice next time. Officer Martinez closed his notebook. Understood. I will go speak with Miss Hutchins now. Would you be willing to provide a copy of that video footage? Absolutely. I sent the file to his email while he waited. I watched from my living room window as Officer Martinez walked down the street to Brenda's house. He rang the doorbell, and after a moment, Brenda appeared. Even from 3 houses away, I could see her body language change when she realized it was a police officer. The conversation lasted about 10 minutes. At one point, Brenda gestured emphatically toward my house. Officer Martinez remained calm, just taking notes and asking questions. Finally, he walked back to my house and rang the doorbell again. "Mr. Yamley, Miss Hutchins denies taking your ice scraper. She claims she purchased her ice scraper from an auto zone in Richfield several months ago, and that any similarity to yours is coincidental. She also stated that you have been harassing her this evening and making false accusations." "Of course she said that. Did you ask to see the scraper?" "I did. She showed it to me. It is a blue ice scraper with a crack near the handle as you described. So what happens now?" "Based on your video evidence and your positive identification of the item, I am going to file a report for petty theft. The case will be reviewed by the city attorney's office, and they will determine if charges should be filed. You should receive a case number within a few days." "Thank you, officer." After he left, I sat on my couch feeling a mix of satisfaction and dread. I had done the right thing, but I knew Brenda would retaliate somehow. Sure enough, the next morning, I found a certified letter in my mailbox from the Willow Creek HOA. It was a formal notice of violation for leaving my vehicle unlocked, which apparently violated the security provisions of our covenant. The fine was $50. I took a photo of the letter and texted it to my neighbor, Paul Richardson, who lived 2 doors down. Paul and I had bonded over our mutual frustration with the HOA. He called me immediately. "She is unbelievable," Paul said. "She actually fined you after stealing from you, apparently so. I am not paying it. Good, fight it. I will back you up if you need witnesses to her crazy behavior." Over the next week, the neighborhood gossip mill went into overdrive. Someone had seen the police at Brenda's house. Someone else heard it was about theft. By the time the story had made the rounds, versions ranged from Brenda stealing mail to Brenda breaking into houses. I did not confirm or deny anything when neighbors asked, but I also did not protect Brenda from the speculation she had brought on herself. The case number arrived in my email 5 days later, along with a note that the Bloomington City Attorney's Office was reviewing the incident. 2 weeks after that, I received a phone call from an assistant city attorney named Jennifer Walsh. "Mr. Yamley, I have reviewed your case regarding the theft of your ice scraper. I have watched the video footage and read Officer Martinez's report. I believe we have sufficient evidence to file misdemeanor theft charges against Brenda Hutchins. However, I wanted to speak with you first about your goals here." "My goal is for her to face consequences for her actions," I said. "She thinks being HOA president puts her above the law." "I understand. These types of cases can be frustrating. If we move forward with charges, Miss Hutchins will be summoned to court. Given the low value of the item and assuming she has no prior criminal record, she would likely be offered a plea deal that might include community service, a fine, and potentially an agreement to stay away from your property. Does that sound acceptable to you?" "That sounds perfect, actually." "Okay, I will file the charges. She should receive her summons within the week." I thanked her and hung up, feeling vindicated. That evening I told Tessa what was happening. She was supportive but concerned. "You know she is going to make things hell at the next HOA meeting, right? Let her try. She is going to be dealing with criminal charges. I think she will have bigger problems." The neighborhood drama reached a fever pitch when Brenda received her court summons. I did not witness it personally, but Paul told me he saw her storming around her yard, talking furiously on her phone. That evening my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Brenda standing there, her face red with anger. "You called the police on me, over an ice scraper. You stole from me, Brenda. What did you expect? I did no such thing. I have owned that scraper for months. You have no proof of anything. I have video of you taking it from my car. The police have that video. The city attorney has that video. You are being charged with theft. This is harassment. I am going to call a lawyer. I am going to sue you for defamation. Go ahead. Everything I have said is true and documented. Now get off my property. You are going to regret this, Ethan. I can make your life very difficult." "Is that a threat? Should I call Officer Martinez back here?" Brenda turned and stormed off my porch without another word. I closed the door and immediately sent a text to Paul about the interaction, just to have a record of it. The court date was set for mid-March, about 6 weeks away. In the meantime, the HOA meetings became increasingly tense. I attended the February meeting specifically to see how Brenda would handle things. The meeting was held in the community center clubhouse, a bland room with folding chairs and fluorescent lighting. About 20 homeowners showed up, which was more than usual. Word had spread about the criminal charges, and people were curious. Brenda conducted the meeting as if nothing was wrong, going through the usual agenda items about snow removal and upcoming landscaping bids. But when we reached the open forum section where homeowners could raise concerns, Paul stood up. "I would like to address the elephant in the room," Paul said. "Is it true that you are facing criminal charges for theft?" The room went completely silent. Brenda's face turned white, then red. "That is a personal matter and not appropriate for HOA business." "I disagree," Paul continued. "You are the president of this association. You represent all of us. If you are being charged with stealing from a homeowner in this community, we have a right to know." Another homeowner, a woman named Sandra Kim, spoke up. "I have to agree. This is a serious allegation." Brenda stood up, gripping the table in front of her. "Fine. Yes, I am dealing with a baseless accusation from Mr. Yamley, who apparently has nothing better to do than harass me over a $7 piece of plastic. I have done nothing wrong and I will be vindicated in court. Now, can we please move on?" But the damage was done. Homeowners were murmuring to each other. Several people were looking at me with sympathy rather than judgment. I stayed quiet, letting Brenda dig her own grave. After the meeting, several neighbors approached me privately. "Good for you for standing up to her," one man said. "She has been a tyrant for too long." The court date arrived on a cold Tuesday morning in March. I took the day off work and drove to the Bloomington Municipal Court building. The courthouse was busy, filled with people dealing with traffic violations and minor criminal matters. I checked in at the clerk's office and was told to wait in courtroom 3B. Brenda was already there when I arrived, sitting with a lawyer who looked expensive in his tailored suit. She did not acknowledge me. Jennifer Walsh, the assistant city attorney, found me in the hallway before the hearing started. "Mr. Yamley, thank you for being here. I wanted to let you know that Miss Hutchins's attorney has approached us about a plea agreement. She is willing to plead guilty to petty theft in exchange for a sentence of 40 hours of community service, restitution for the ice scraper, and 2 years of probation. No jail time. Does that sound acceptable to you? She is actually going to plead guilty. Her attorney knows we have strong evidence. Fighting this would cost her more in legal fees than it is worth, and she risks a harsher sentence if she goes to trial and loses. Then yes, that is acceptable." The hearing itself was anticlimactic. We all stood when Judge Patricia Morrison entered. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who had clearly handled thousands of these cases. Brenda and her attorney approached the bench. The judge reviewed the plea agreement, asked Brenda several questions to ensure she understood what she was agreeing to, and then accepted the guilty plea. "Miss Hutchins," Judge Morrison said, looking down at Brenda over her reading glasses, "you have pleaded guilty to petty theft. I am sentencing you to 40 hours of community service to be completed within 6 months, restitution of $7 to the victim, and 2 years of probation. Additionally, I am issuing a no-contact order. You are not to approach Mr. Yamley's property or have any direct communication with him except as required for HOA business conducted in public meetings. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Brenda said quietly. All the fire had gone out of her voice. "Community service assignments will be coordinated through the county. Failure to complete your hours will result in additional penalties. Do you have any questions?" "No, Your Honor." "Then we are adjourned." And just like that, it was over. Brenda Hutchins, the woman who had terrorized the neighborhood with petty fines and power trips, was now a convicted criminal on probation. She walked out of the courtroom without looking at anyone, her lawyer trailing behind her. Jennifer Walsh shook my hand in the hallway. "Thank you for pursuing this. I know it seemed like a small thing, but people need to understand that theft is theft, regardless of the value. Thank you for taking it seriously." I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw Paul standing in his yard, clearly waiting for news. I walked over and told him everything. "Community service. That is perfect," Paul said, grinning. "She is going to hate every second of that. I hope she learned something from it." News of the guilty plea spread through the neighborhood faster than I could have imagined. By that evening, my phone was buzzing with texts from neighbors expressing support, and in some cases, glee. It turned out a lot of people had been waiting for someone to stand up to Brenda. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for early April. I almost did not go, but Tessa convinced me I should. "You need to see this through," she said. "You started something important." The meeting had the highest turnout I had ever seen. The room was packed with at least 40 homeowners. Brenda sat at the front table, looking smaller somehow. She called the meeting to order in a subdued voice, completely different from her usual authoritative tone. We were only 10 minutes into the meeting when Sandra Kim raised her hand. "I move that we hold a vote of no confidence in the current HOA president." Several people seconded the motion immediately. Brenda looked stunned. "That is not on the agenda." "I do not care," Sandra said. "According to our bylaws, any homeowner can make a motion during a meeting." "I am making this motion now." Paul stood up. "I second the motion and call for an immediate vote." Brenda's hands were shaking as she shuffled through papers. "This is highly irregular." "Actually, it is completely within the rules," said another homeowner, Marcus Tang, who was a lawyer himself. "I reviewed the bylaws last night in anticipation of this. A vote of no confidence requires a simple majority of homeowners present at a meeting where quorum is met. We clearly have quorum." Brenda looked around the room desperately, but she had no allies left. "Fine. All in favor of a vote of no confidence." Hands shot up all around the room. I counted at least 30 people voting in favor. Only 2 hands stayed down. "Opposed?" Brenda asked weakly. 2 hands went up, including Brenda's own. "The motion passes," Sandra said firmly. "Effective immediately, you are removed as HOA president. We will hold elections for a new president at next month's meeting." Brenda sat there for a moment, looking shell-shocked. Then she gathered her papers, stood up, and walked out of the community center without saying a word. The room erupted in applause. Sandra took over running the rest of the meeting. She was organized and fair, asking for input from homeowners and actually listening to concerns. It was like watching a dictatorship transform into a democracy in real time. We voted on several reforms that night, including limiting the president's ability to issue fines without board approval and creating an appeals process for covenant violations. After the meeting, I felt genuinely optimistic about the neighborhood for the first time in years. Paul clapped me on the back. "You did that, man. You took her down." "I just wanted my ice scraper back," I said, laughing, "and you got justice instead. Even better." Over the following months, I occasionally saw Brenda around the neighborhood. She kept her head down and never made eye contact. I heard through the grapevine that she was completing her community service hours at a food bank in Minneapolis, sorting donations. The irony of forcing her to help others was not lost on anyone. The no-contact order worked exactly as intended. Brenda could not harass me directly, and without her position as HOA president, she had no authority to fine me or anyone else. The new president, Sandra Kim, ran things with common sense and actual respect for the homeowners. Covenant violations were addressed reasonably. The neighborhood felt different, lighter somehow. In May, Tessa and I were working in our front yard, planting flowers, when Paul came over with news. "You will never believe this. Brenda is selling her house." "Really?" "Yeah, her realtor just put up a sign this morning." I guess she cannot handle being a regular person in the neighborhood after being queen bee for so long. I felt a small twinge of something that might have been guilt, but it passed quickly. Brenda had brought all of this on herself. She had stolen from me, lied about it, and tried to use her position to punish me for calling her out. The consequences were entirely her own doing. "Good riddance," Tessa said, patting soil around a marigold. "Maybe the new neighbors will actually be nice." The house sold quickly, and by July, Brenda was gone. I never saw her again. Her community service hours were completed by August, according to the court records, which were public. She had done her time, literally and figuratively. The new owners who moved into Brenda's old house were a young couple named Tim and Rachel Montgomery with 2 small kids. They were friendly and normal, the kind of neighbors who waved when you drove by and did not care if your trash can stayed out an extra few hours. The transformation was complete. Looking back on the whole situation, I still cannot believe how much chaos came from a $7 ice scraper. But it was never really about the scraper. It was about someone abusing power and thinking they were untouchable. It was about standing up for yourself when someone crosses a line. It was about accountability. I bought a new ice scraper from Target, ironically the exact same model as the original one. I keep it in my car, though I also keep a backup in my garage now, just in case. Every time I use it on cold Minnesota mornings, I think about everything that happened. The video footage, the police report, the court hearing, the guilty plea. The look on Brenda's face when the neighborhood voted her out. The relief I felt knowing that justice, even in a small way, had been served. Tessa jokes that I am the guy who sent someone to community service over an ice scraper, and she is not wrong. But everyone who lived through Brenda's reign of HOA terror understands why it mattered. Sometimes the smallest injustices are symptoms of bigger problems. Sometimes a $7 piece of plastic becomes the straw that breaks the camel's back. The Willow Creek HOA is better now. Sandra Kim serves as president with actual oversight from a functioning board. We still have rules and covenants, but they are enforced fairly and reasonably. Fines are rare and only issued after warnings and opportunities to correct violations. People actually enjoy living here again instead of walking on eggshells waiting for the next citation. Paul told me last week that he thinks I am a neighborhood hero. I do not know about that, but I do know that I did the right thing. When someone wrongs you, even in a small way, you have a choice. You can let it slide, or you can stand up and say this is not okay. I chose to stand up, and the ripple effects changed an entire community for the better. The incident taught me several important lessons. First, document everything. That Ring doorbell footage was crucial to the entire case. Without it, the situation would have been my word against Brenda's, and nothing would have happened. Second, do not be afraid to use the legal system for what it is designed for. Petty theft is still theft. Laws exist to protect everyone, even in minor situations. Third, bullies rely on people being too intimidated or tired to fight back. The moment you stand up to them, their power evaporates. I also learned that communities are only as good as the people who run them. An HOA should exist to maintain property values and handle shared expenses like landscaping and snow removal. It should not exist as a weapon for petty tyrants to wield against their neighbors. The homeowners of Willow Creek had tolerated Brenda's behavior for too long, because confronting her seemed harder than just paying the fines and following her arbitrary rules. My situation gave everyone permission to say enough is enough. There were definitely costs to my decision. The stress of dealing with the police report, the court case, and the neighborhood drama was significant. Tessa and I had several long conversations about whether it was worth it. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I was being petty or vindictive. But every time I second-guessed myself, I came back to the core issue. Brenda had committed a crime. She had entered my property, gone through my vehicle, and taken something that belonged to me. Then she lied about it and tried to punish me for calling her out. That is not acceptable behavior, period. The 40 hours of community service Brenda was sentenced to probably felt like an eternity to her. I imagine her at that food bank, sorting cans of soup and boxes of pasta, thinking about how a stupid ice scraper had destroyed her little empire. Part of me hopes she gained some perspective from the experience. Helping people who actually need it, who are struggling with food insecurity and poverty, might have shown her how ridiculous her HOA power trips had been. But maybe I am giving her too much credit. Some people never learn. The probation aspect of her sentence was also significant. For 2 years, Brenda Hutchins had a criminal record hanging over her head. Any other legal trouble during that time would have resulted in much harsher penalties. The no-contact order meant she could not take out her anger on me directly. She was effectively neutered, which was probably more painful for her than the community service. I did eventually get my $7 in restitution, by the way. It came as a check from the Hennepin County court system, issued about 6 weeks after the sentencing. $7 that had caused thousands of dollars in legal fees for Brenda, and fundamentally changed the social structure of our neighborhood. I framed that check instead of cashing it. It hangs in my home office as a reminder that principle matters more than convenience. Winter came around again, and I found myself scraping ice off my windshield on a cold December morning. The neighborhood was quiet and peaceful. Holiday decorations hung on houses without anyone measuring to ensure they complied with HOA color schemes. A few trash cans sat by curbs, forgotten after collection day, and no one was writing citations about it. It felt like living in an actual community instead of a homeowner's prison. I thought about what my life would be like if I had not confronted Brenda that evening, if I had just let her keep my ice scraper and bought a new one without saying anything. She would still be HOA president, still terrorizing people with fines and rules. The neighborhood would still be tense and unhappy. All because I decided that a $7 ice scraper was worth fighting for. Tessa came outside as I was finishing up with the windshield. "You look deep in thought," she said, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. "Just thinking about everything that happened this year. Do you regret it?" I looked around at our neighborhood, at the houses where people were living their lives without fear of petty retribution. Not for a second. She smiled and kissed my cheek. Good, because you did something important. You stood up to a bully. You made things better. I just wanted my ice scraper back, I said again, the same thing I had told Paul months ago. And you got so much more. She was right. I had gotten justice. I had gotten accountability. I had gotten a better neighborhood, and the satisfaction of knowing that no one is above the law, not even the HOA president. Most importantly, I had shown myself and everyone else that it is worth fighting for what is right, even when the stakes seem small. The rest of that winter passed peacefully. Spring arrived, bringing the usual Minnesota mud and the joy of temperatures above freezing. Sandra Kim organized a neighborhood barbecue in May, the first community event we had that actually felt welcoming and fun rather than mandatory and awkward. People showed up with food and lawn chairs. Kids ran around playing tag while adults talked and laughed. This was what a neighborhood was supposed to feel like. Paul brought his famous ribs and cornered me by the grill. You know, everyone still talks about what you did, right? You are a legend. I am really not, I said, laughing. I just filed a police report. You took down Brenda the tyrant. That is legendary status in Willow Creek. I glanced around at all the happy faces, people actually enjoying where they lived. It was worth it. Damn right it was. As I stood there with a burger in one hand and a beer in the other, watching my neighbors relax and have fun, I realized something important. Communities are fragile things. They require good people to function properly, and they require vigilance when bad people try to take control. For too long, everyone in Willow Creek had assumed someone else would deal with Brenda, or that nothing could be done, or that it was not worth the hassle. All it took was one person deciding that enough was enough. I am not saying I am a hero. I am just a guy who wanted his ice scraper back and was stubborn enough to pursue it. But sometimes stubbornness in the face of injustice is exactly what is needed. Sometimes a small act of resistance can spark bigger changes. Sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone. The months continued to roll by. I watched as the new normal settled into Willow Creek. People maintained their properties because they took pride in where they lived, not because they feared fines. The HOA budget was managed transparently, with Sandra sending out detailed quarterly reports showing exactly where our dues went. Covenant violations were rare, and when they happened, they were handled with friendly conversations rather than threatening letters. I also noticed something interesting. Property values in Willow Creek actually went up after Brenda left. Turns out people are willing to pay more for houses in neighborhoods that are not run by tyrants. Who knew? Several homes sold that year, and each new family that moved in was welcomed warmly by neighbors who were genuinely happy to meet them rather than sizing them up for potential violations. In August, I got an email from Jennifer Walsh, the assistant city attorney who had handled the case. She was checking in to let me know that Brenda's probation period was halfway complete and that she had complied with all requirements so far. "Thank you again for pursuing this case," she wrote. It sent an important message that theft is unacceptable regardless of the circumstances or the value involved. I appreciated her reaching out. It reminded me that the legal system, despite its flaws, does work when people use it properly. Too many minor crimes go unreported because victims think it is not worth the hassle or that nothing will happen anyway. But justice is cumulative. Each case that gets prosecuted reinforces the rules that hold society together. By the time fall arrived again, nearly a full year after the ice scraper incident, life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. I worked from home, attended the occasional HOA meeting that was actually productive and boring in a good way, and enjoyed living in a neighborhood where people said hello instead of looking for reasons to complain. One October afternoon, I was raking leaves in the front yard when Tim Montgomery, Brenda's replacement neighbor, came over to chat. "Hey, Ethan, I have been meaning to ask you something. We heard stories about the previous owner of our house. Something about her being HOA president and getting in trouble." I leaned on my rake. "Yeah, that was quite a situation. She stole my ice scraper from my car and I pressed charges. It kind of snowballed from there." Tim laughed. "An ice scraper? Seriously? Seriously?" "She pleaded guilty to petty theft, did community service, and got voted out as HOA president. Then she sold the house and moved away." "That is insane. Over an ice scraper." "It was about more than the scraper. It was about someone abusing power and thinking they could get away with anything." "The scraper was just the final straw." Tim nodded thoughtfully. "Well, for what it is worth, we love this neighborhood. Everyone has been so welcoming. Rachel and I were worried about HOA drama because we heard horror stories from friends in other subdivisions, but this place has been great." "That is good to hear. It was not always this way, but it is better now." After Tim went back to his yard work, I continued raking, thinking about how much had changed. A year ago, I had been furious and frustrated, wondering if I should even bother fighting back against Brenda's theft. Now I was living in a genuinely pleasant community, talking to friendly neighbors who had no idea what life had been like under her rule. That was progress. Thanksgiving came and went. Then Christmas. The neighborhood looked beautiful with lights and decorations, each house displaying its own style without anyone measuring lumens or enforcing color restrictions. Kids built snowmen in front yards. Couples took evening walks, bundled up against the cold. This was what I had hoped for when Tessa and I bought our house here 3 years ago. On a Tuesday morning in January, exactly 1 year after Brenda stole my ice scraper, I walked out to my car to find it covered in frost again. I grabbed my replacement ice scraper from the passenger seat and spent a few minutes clearing the windshield. The familiar scraping sound, the cold plastic in my gloved hands, the satisfaction of revealing clean glass beneath the ice, it all felt routine and normal, the way it should. But as I finished and tossed the scraper back into my car, I could not help but smile. 1 year ago, this simple act had been complicated by theft and lies and abuse of power. Today, it was just a guy clearing his windshield before heading out. The difference was profound. Tessa appeared at the front door in her scrubs, running late for her shift as usual. "You look happy for someone scraping ice at 7 in the morning." "Just appreciating the little things," I called back. She gave me a confused look but smiled and headed to her own car. I watched her leave, then took a moment to look around at the neighborhood. The sun was coming up, casting long shadows across snowy lawns. Smoke rose from chimneys. The world was peaceful and ordinary. That ordinariness was the real victory. Not the guilty plea or the community service, or even Brenda's resignation and departure. The real victory was returning to a place where a scraping ice off a windshield was boring instead of a reminder of theft and conflict. The real victory was living in a neighborhood where people were not afraid of their HOA president. I got in my car and drove to my occasional office meeting, leaving Willow Creek behind in my rearview mirror. But I knew I would be back that evening, returning to a home in a community that worked the way it was supposed to. A community where people looked out for each other instead of looking for violations. A community where justice had been served, even for something as small as a $7 ice scraper, because in the end, it was never really about the scraper at all. It was about standing up for what is right, even when it seems insignificant. It was about holding people accountable, even when they think their position protects them. It was about being willing to fight battles that others might consider too small to bother with, because sometimes those small battles are the ones that matter most. As I drove through the streets of Bloomington that morning, past other subdivisions with their own HOAs and their own dramas, I felt grateful for everything that had happened. The frustration, the police reports, the court hearing, the neighborhood meetings, all of it had led to real change. Brenda Hutchins was gone, her power dismantled, her crimes punished. The people of Willow Creek were free to live their lives without petty tyranny. And me? I was just a guy who got his justice, $7 at a time. A guy who proved that sometimes the smallest acts of resistance can topple the biggest bullies. A guy who would never again underestimate the importance of standing up for principle, no matter how trivial the specific incident might seem. The ice scraper sits in my car to this day, right where it belongs. It is just a piece of blue plastic with a brush on one end, cracked near the handle, worth about $7. But to me, it represents something more. It represents the moment I decided that enough was enough. The moment I chose action over acceptance. The moment I learned that justice is not just for big crimes and important people, it is for everyone, in every situation, no matter how small. And that lesson, more than anything else that came from this whole crazy situation, was worth fighting for.